Okay, let's open the doors. Happy 2026. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our event today. Let's turn on the chat and make sure that everyone can chat with each other. Okay, thank you for joining us today, everyone. This is our first event for 2026 on behalf of the entire Bentham Science team. Thank you so much for joining us. If you are joining us for the first time, welcome. You're in the right place. We have researchers of all career stages, all disciplines, all types joining us at these events. So welcome. Thank you for taking time to check us out. If you are a returning guest, you've come to our events before, thank you so much for always making time. We appreciate seeing familiar names and guests at these events. So thank you always for coming back. And this is an exciting event for us because it's the first of the year, and we've got a whole series of new events planned for you. We're really excited. So, on behalf of Bentham, thank you so much for joining us. The topic today is IMRaD Power. We'll focus on pro tips for each section, for writing each section of your research manuscript. And who better to guide us through this process than a luxuriously well published author, journal editor, beloved instructor, internet personality, Dr. Gareth Dyke. Gareth, how are things?
Great, everything's great. Happy New Year, everybody. Happy 2026. Do let us know where you're
Yay.
from. We love to learn all about that. Thank you for the intro. I'm not sure any of those things are true, but no, it's great to be back. Great to see you again this year, Scott. I'm excited to do this series of events once more for our friends and colleagues at Bentham Science.
Great. Yes, it is. And I think last year was a very successful year from Bentham and its journals, increasing numbers of impact factor journals and increasing impact factors and growing the range, growing the books, growing the journal series. We'll talk a bit more about Bentham in just a minute. So we're very excited to be back on behalf of Bentham. And I can see guests are already chiming in and introducing yourselves. Yes, great. Please do let us know who you are, where you're joining us from, if you care to. Let us know what kind of research you're doing if you're interested. If you're a humanities person like myself, or if you're a hard scientist like Dr. Dyke here, please let us know what kind of work you're doing. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love to meet researchers from all around the world.
Absolutely. We've got Bangladesh, Ghana, Malaysia, Nigeria, Zimbabwe. India, of course, Germany, Pakistan. Wow, it's a real international audience today. I'm in Budapest in Hungary. Scott, where are you today?
I am in more or less central Tokyo, Japan here. It's a very lovely, crisp winter day here. And no matter where you are, by the way, if you have colleagues who are in other time zones, for example, you might have colleagues that are in the Americas, and it might not be a convenient time for them to join this event. Anyone is able to watch this event on demand at any time. So if you have colleagues in other time zones who are not able to join, just let them know. They can go to the sign up link and watch this event on demand absolutely anytime. And that also goes for the recording. If you miss anything today, if you're busy, or if we go a bit too fast, as we sometimes do, remember you can always review this event and you can review Dr. Dyke's tips absolutely anytime by video.
Absolutely fantastic. Great to see everybody. Really, really good. Poland, Malaysia, Sudan, fantastic. Bangladesh, Turkey. Wow, amazing. I think we're about ready to get started with our webinar today, I would say, right, Scott?
I
This
think
is a bit
so.
about
Yeah. And Gareth, tell us a little bit about yourself. For those who are joining us for the first time, tell us a bit about your work and your career.
Oh, well, I mean, I'm a researcher. I was a paleontologist for many years, writing research articles, writing book chapters, contributing to peer-reviewed volumes. I worked as an editor for many years. Now, Scott and I have our training company, SciTrain. Do have a look at scitrain.com. We provide webinars and training engagement for publishers like our friends at Bentham Science. So these events brought to you today on behalf of Bentham Science. So we should get started by saying a few things about Bentham, right, Scott?
Absolutely. Bentham, as you can see on the slide here, is a growth publisher with a lean towards the scientific, technical, and medical journals, books, and ebooks. As you can see now, more than 166 online and print journals. many with significant impact factors. Also, book publishing. If you're interested in any of Bentham's journals, you can visit them. I'll put the link in the chat below. It's also important to note that Bentham is a member of COPE, the Committee on Publication Ethics. Bentham is highly committed to ethical publication and robust peer review. It has one of the strongest and most robust peer review systems of nearly any publisher in the world. And it's a family-owned company founded by scientists for scientists. So I'll put the link in the description. Feel free to check out Bentham and its journals and books. And if you are a librarian, lucky day, you can get free access for your institution for up to 3 months. No strings, no complications. Just contact the Bentham team or scan the QR code there on your screen to get a free trial for your institution. It's the complete collection, including all the high impact factor journals. And it's a great chance to just check out the resources available from Bentham for your institution. So click on the
Yeah.
QR code and get your free trial.
Send it to a librarian. If you have a friendly librarian that you think might be interested in this QR code, do that. I noticed that we've got a number of comments already about the Zoom Chinese, Mandarin Chinese subtitle function. We'll have to try to turn that on. Thank you for your comment, JH. We'll turn that on either later on in this event or in all of our subsequent events. That's absolutely fantastic feedback. Do scan this QR code. Do have a look at all of the fantastic journals and ebooks that Bentham Science has to offer. But for today's event, talking about the IMRaD academic structure, powering through a research paper, putting a research paper together, we're kind of moving a little bit away from humanities and social sciences today, unfortunately, Scott, because the IMRaD structure is usually associated with STM, science, technology, medicine, and mathematics publications. But there's tips here for everybody, right, Scott?
That's true, although there is some application for humanities as well. There's often a combined results and discussion, but you're right, this is much more of a STEM focused structure. So if you're a humanities person like myself, there are still some worthwhile tips for you here. And also worth mentioning that, Gareth, between yourself and myself, we have edited hundreds of manuscripts, student papers, and so on. And we see a lot of common issues with researchers of all stages, particular to each of these stages of the writing. So it's worth pointing out that the tips we're providing today are for the writing of the manuscript itself. So we won't delve into how to devise your methods, for example, but we will talk about the best ways perhaps to approach writing your methods within the structure of an IMRaD research paper.
Any further questions, we'll have a good chance for Q&A at the end of our event today. Of course, there are loads of other events that we've done for Bentham Science. If you have a look at the Bentham Science YouTube channel or indeed at scitrain.com, Scott's already pasted the link to that website into the chat. We'll get going. We'll talk about methods. We'll talk about results. We'll talk about discussion and conclusion, and we'll talk about your introduction. In this sequence, why is that? We hear you ask. Well, this is usually the sequence in which research articles tend to be written, starting with the methods and results section, moving on then to the discussion and conclusion, and often finishing or writing last the fantastic introduction section. And it's also really important to have a think before you get going with writing your next research article. What kinds of issues are encountered by journals and journal editors that may prevent quick and effective peer-reviewed publication? This data from a survey of journal editors lists some of the top issues that journal editors at publishing companies like Bentham Science would often encounter: papers outside scope, plagiarism, incorrect formatting, poor English writing, reviewer responses and how we respond to comments that we get on our work. We'll come back to that. We'll talk about that in other events this year, as well as recycled submissions. One key issue getting started writing a paper is a clear understanding of the ethics that underlie both your research and the publication process. So we have events on that. We have other courses planned on research and publishing ethics. Do get in touch with us. Do have a look at scitrain.com if you'd like any more information. But as you begin the process of writing a paper, structuring into that IMRaD structure that we're going to talk about in this event, it's important initially to know your target journal and its audience. Message, audience, and structure are three key elements to have in mind before you begin the writing process. So which journal have you selected? What are its requirements and guidelines, and who is your audience? Who's going to be reading this fantastic piece of work that you're putting together? Will it be specialists, as is often the case with our research articles? Will it be more cross-disciplinary, which is really what we should be aiming for with higher impact factor research articles? Or will it be a piece of general research writing that you can aim at a broad general audience? This is why Scott and I always recommend that before you begin to write a research article, you've got your audience in mind. Those three fantastic elements to have in mind before you begin to write your takeaway message. What's the key element that you want people to get out of reading your research paper? The audience, that's the journal that you're going to choose, and then the structure, which of course is what we're talking about today. Structure in academic writing is absolutely key because readers need to know where they've come from, where they are now, and where they're going. It's just like reading a story, like reading a detective story or a novel. You've got to have a structure in place for your research article so that people can follow it, know where they are in the structure, and know what's going to happen next. So message, audience, and structure are three key elements to have in mind before you begin the writing process. So you've got your message. You know what it is that you want people to get out of reading your research paper, the main key takeaway message. And usually research articles are structured around a single or several key takeaway messages. You know the structure because you've gone and you've looked at your journal, you've listened to some of our previous events on journal selection, on effective journal selection for research writing, and now you're thinking about the standard IMRaD egg timer structure for your research article. And here it is, the introduction, the methods, results, and discussion in that fantastic egg timer shape that we often talk about in the context of research articles, because the introduction is nice and broad, gets everybody interested in the topic at hand. It then narrows down to start talking about the specifics of your study. Into the methods and results, of course, the content here is very specific to your particular study. It has to be, so very narrow, very specific. That's the central portion of the egg timer. And then, of course, you get broad again as you begin your discussion. You start your discussion by talking about what your results mean in the context of your particular study, and then you broaden that out to give the reader that general context. And here we have it, logically linking ideas throughout your paper, that fantastic standard IMRaD egg timer structure. And as we mentioned at the very beginning of our event today, of course, there's a reading order for research articles, as you can see on the left-hand side of the slide, versus a writing order for your research paper on the right-hand side of the slide. The order in which somebody's going to read your paper, title and abstract, introduction, methods, results, discussion. We hope that they get all the way down to the end. Of course, many people won't, and that's also a key element to keep in mind when hooking your readers, getting them interested in your article. It's often better, easier, more effective, as we'll talk about today in our webinar event, to write your paper in what we like to call the right order: the methods, results, discussion, conclusion, introduction, title, and abstract, in that particular sequence. So do keep this in mind, because many people do tend to think that they've got to write their papers in the sequence in which the text appears in the article, the reading order. And that's not the most effective way to do it. So let's have a look at this quick poll. Make sure everybody's still awake and still with us. Scott's going to pop back in. We're going to see how you feel about writing the different sections of your paper. Scott.
Okay, this is our first poll tonight. I'm having some issues launching the poll, so we'll do this in the chat. Let us know which section of the manuscript is hardest for you to write. Is it the abstract? Is it the introduction, methods, results, or the discussion conclusion? Feel free to type your answer into the chat. We'll see what our guests feel. Gareth, you've written a number of peer-reviewed papers as an author and as a co-author.
Hmm.
How about you? What sections or what section is most challenging for you?
Oh, for me, I would have to say definitely the abstract. Absolutely tricky because the journal will often give a very tightly defined word limit. They'll say 200 words or 250 words. And if you've got a lot to say, you may struggle to get all of the necessary information packed into the abstract. But let's see what our audience members, our guests think in our poll.
Okay, answers coming in hot. I see a lot of mentions of the methods. Interesting. Perhaps we should point out that we are talking specifically about writing the methods in the manuscript rather than devising the methods themselves. Interesting. Lots of different answers here. I would say it's fairly evenly distributed. A couple of mentions of the discussion. Looks like the introduction and the methods are coming up. Quite a lot.
Mm, yeah. We'll have time later to talk about this in more detail. And we certainly hope that the information that we're going to give you now about, as Scott mentioned, how you can think about structuring these different components of your research paper will be of use. Let's move on. Let's talk a little bit about the methods as we get into this IMRaD structure. Remember the right order. This is going to be, we hope, or we would suggest, one of the first parts of the paper that you'd want to write. Right, Scott, people do tend to get a bit confused about this, which bit to start with when writing a research article.
Right. There's no hard rule, and you've certainly written more manuscripts than I have, but I do find with authors, this is a fairly logical way. And if you are yourself a graduate student and you're writing your dissertation for your PhD or master's, this is quite often the way grad programs are set up, where you devise your methods and you get feedback from your research advisor, and then you kind of do this piecemeal bit by bit and send it to your advisor and get feedback and go back. The great thing is you can follow this same process as a postdoc or as a professional. You can draft the methods, share them with your co-authors or your team as you continue working on the results and so on. You can get feedback on each section in chunks like this through methods, results, discussion, and introduction. And just a quick mention, Gareth, for those who mentioned that the abstract and introductions and title and abstract are difficult for you, we do have a future event coming up next month precisely on writing abstracts and titles. So just to let you know, if that's a difficult section for you, join us for our event next month. Back to you, Gareth.
Sign up. Don't forget to sign up. We love to see you back in our events. One of the key elements about writing your methods section is which tense should you be using? And we've summarized a lot of this information from our experience looking at research papers here on this slide. In the methods section, of course, you're talking about work that you have already done when you're writing up the paper. People are reading the paper in the present, they're reading it right now. You're writing that section in the past tense. So we measured, we surveyed, and also we're using the first person often in our writing. And we'll talk about that as well in a moment. But this is absolutely key. Making your writing interesting and relatable using the past tense for the method section. And this is the core of any paper. A research question can be answered many different ways. And this is the element, the section, the component of a research article where you are likely to have the most issues during the peer review process. Reviewers will be carefully checking the methods that you used to answer your question. So they will be asking themselves, are the methodologies and data analysis appropriate in this section? Could the question be answered with other methods? So do have a good think about this as you start to structure your methods section. It's the element, the section of a research article where you are likely to have the most problems in peer review. So show your methods to other people. Make sure you do put all of the necessary methodological details into this section for somebody else to be able to duplicate the work. And of course, that depends on your target journal. If it's a general multidisciplinary journal, you're going to have to put more information in about what you did. Whereas if it's a subject area specific journal where the readers are going to know more about the subject, the methods that are standard in your area, then you don't need to put so much information in. And deciding which components, which bits of information is a key skill as you develop your writing and publishing portfolio. But methods are absolutely key. It's extremely common for editors to reject a paper because authors have used the wrong method, or editors and reviewers perceive that they've used the wrong method. So give enough detail so a qualified reader can repeat the study. If your method section is thin on details, editors are going to worry that you're hiding something. So have a think about this. Make sure you share your statistical analyses with an expert before you start to even perform them. We have lots of friends who can help you if you need that kind of support. Do get in touch with Scott and I. Later on, we'll hook you up with people who can help you with statistics, experimental design, data collection. You are going to follow what we call the IMrAD framework: methods, materials, analysis, design, and reporting. Have a look at this checklist. Take a screenshot. Listen back to this event a little bit later because this is absolutely critical for structuring a fantastic method section, which, by the way, is usually done in a timeline sequence. Thinking about what you did first, second, third, fourth, and last as you move through your experimental process. The IMrAD framework is a great starting point for putting together a fantastic methods section. And Scott's going to jump back in. We're going to ask you a question now, which may be quite familiar. Scott.
Okay, thank you, Gareth. Let's see if our polls are working here. Looks like they're working. So the question is, have you ever been asked by a reviewer to clarify your methods? In my case, yes, when I was writing my dissertation, I was asked several times to clarify my methods because they weren't very good. So how about you? Have you had this experience where reviewers asked you to clarify your methods?
I certainly have on a number of occasions written papers. We'll talk about that a little bit later in the Q&A session, but absolutely. Yeah, very, very, very common experience. I'm sure many of our audience members, our guests will also have that experience.
I will say also that working with authors, of course, devising the methods can be very difficult, but I find that for authors, just once you've got your methods set, just writing them into the manuscript is, I think for many authors, less challenging than some of the other sections I find. But let's see what our guests think. Okay, more than half of our guests say that they have been asked to clarify their methods. That's not very surprising, is it, Gareth? This is something that happens all the time.
It absolutely does. As we've already mentioned, this is really the section of your research paper where you have the biggest risk of having a problem during the peer review process. So make sure you do bulletproof, waterproof your methods, get them checked by an expert, your supervisor, another colleague to make sure that they really, really are definitely going to be clearly understandable to everybody reading the paper. So great, fantastic. Let's move swiftly on. We're going to talk now about the results section. This is also very key, very important. Of course, often the first or second component of the research article that you would be putting together. And again, let's think about how we're going to write this particular section. In the results, again, most often you're going to use the past tense when you think about writing components of this section. We found that T cells increased using, where possible, the present tense, the active voice. Past tense for the methods, past tense for the results. Remember, people are reading the paper in the current moment. You are talking about work that you have done in the past. So, in this section, it's important for you to show clearly and simply what happened in your study. You know what your findings are, but your readers do not. And again, this depends upon the target journal where you've pitched the work. If it's to a general journal, a multidisciplinary journal, then more information will be needed. But you're going to have to nevertheless logically guide your readers, show them what you found. And this is often done with figures. One figure for one result, and then you talk about that figure, and again, following the same timeline structure as you had in the methods section, your data collection, data analysis, and then in sequence, talking about the results as you build up to your main conclusion. So, a figure is a great way to get your ideas in shape for writing your results section, even if you don't end up using that figure in your research paper. You'll still use the figure, I'm sure, in a conference presentation, maybe in a poster in the future, but do this. Do think about the structure of your results section based around graphics, images. What's the one key message that you want people, readers, to take away from this figure? So keep them clear and simple, conveying one key message per figure. And by the way, we have another webinar on the creation of images, data presentation, and great tips for producing amazing, fantastic figures. So do have a look at that as well if you're interested. But absolutely critically, the results section of your paper, no interpretation yet. That comes later. This is the narrow section of that hourglass part of the research article. You're going to order your results around primary and secondary outcomes using the same order as in the methods, stating clearly and simply what you found using words and numbers, and using tables and appropriately selected figures for your main findings. As we've discussed, it's very important to get into the habit of doing this, presenting your results using figures, describing those figures in the text of your paper. So when writing and showing your results, think, of course, about the type of data you are presenting, the main message that you're presenting in your work, how this information will be used by other researchers, and who the intended audience is. Again, this comes back again and again to our target journal. Readers, users of research, are the most important people in the whole process. And we think that often research writers like you and me, Scott, and the rest of us, we forget about readers when putting our research papers together. So help people to understand your work. Your tables, charts, and figures should be representative of the data, not obscuring the meaning of the data. We see this often as well. So let's have a look at another quick poll. Let's have a look at this and see. Scott's going to jump back in a minute here, and we're going to look at this particular interesting piece of graphical presentation, right, Scott?
Oh, unmuting. Okay, you can see the graph on your screen here. These are representing the same data set, but they've obviously been adjusted to emphasize the data set just a bit. Pardon me. Let's try a poll here and see what you think. Is it okay to adjust the scale of a graph to make the results look more significant? Yes or no? Let's see what you think. As an editor, Gareth, have you encountered this kind of manipulation of results?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Of course, it's human nature. You've got some data, you've got some results. You want to do everything you can, everything possible to show those in the most favorable light to your readers. But this is a really interesting poll. How are we doing with answers to?
Very interesting, very split between our guests. It looks like 54% of our guests feel that this is acceptable, and 47% feel that it is not. Let's end the poll here. Take a look at the results. Yeah, so very evenly split. This is a tricky one, isn't it, Gareth? Now, as a journal editor, how would you feel if you saw this data set represented in this way?
Well, this is part of the problem, you see, because you may not realize as a journal editor or as a reviewer that the data is not being presented in the fairest way. This is part of the issue of ethics in data presentation. And really, this is on the author. The onus here is on the author, on you, on us, when writing up and publishing our work, to make sure that we do it in the fairest possible way. This may get picked up later by reviewers and editors, but what could happen What you don't want to happen is that this gets noted and pointed out later after publication in a response or in a commentary by another researcher. You're not being fair in your data presentation. So I would say it's not okay to do this. Really not okay to do this. It's an ethical issue in terms of data presentation. Be fair with your data. Don't do things like adjusting scales to make your results look more significant, as we can see in that example. Let's move on. Let's discuss the discussion. And the key word here, of course, is discuss. What are you going to talk about in the discussion? It really means interpretation. In English, of course, you're going to interpret and discuss the results that you presented in your previous results section. So here you're going to talk about what it means, what the results mean. In the present tense, these results suggest that, and also what is needed in the future. So you may very well end up using both the present tense and the future tense in this part of the research paper to talk about what you've shown, what you're showing right now, and what future studies may look at in the future. So 3 tips we have for writing an effective discussion. Tip number 1, do not write an expansive essay that goes all over the place, that extrapolates wildly from what you've found. Start the discussion with a single sentence that states your main findings, and then discuss both the strengths and the weaknesses of your study. These are 3 key components of a fantastic, well-written, well-structured, and well-thought-through discussion section that doesn't go wildly off topic. Start your discussion by answering the question that your research paper seeks to address. Don't give the reader an expansive literature review. You've got to give them the information that they need to understand why your study was important and what it means in the future. So don't be expansive. Start your discussion with a single sentence that states your main findings. What is the answer to the question that your research paper seeks to address? And of course, you're going to have to discuss both the strengths and weaknesses of your study. Really, really important. Here's a few tips to get this effectively done. You're going to relate your study to what's already been found. How does your study fit in with what's already known, the state of the art? That is an area that you'll put together in the introduction. What are the strengths and weaknesses of your study compared to previous ones? And why does your paper offer a different conclusion? Discuss what your study means, but don't overstate the importance of those findings. And don't forget to give unanswered questions. What does your research not address? Very important to do this. You don't want people reading your paper and thinking for themselves what they might do next based on your work. You've got to put those ideas into your discussion so that you can get cited in the future. So explain, interpret, relate, synthesize, limit your conclusions to what your data actually support, and speculate on why this occurred, and suggest specific directions for future research. Of course, avoiding that fantastic cliche that Scott and I see all the time. We love it and we hate it all at the same time. More research will be needed if we are to fully understand the answer to this question. Of course, it's a cliche. More research will always be needed, of course, but many people do use this as a way of ending their paper, and we don't suggest that you do that. Your interpretation comes here. It's not speculation. So stay anchored to the data. Explain why your results matter. Go beyond what your data support. That's speculation, and it should be either clearly labeled, we speculate that, or just avoid it altogether. Your strong discussions are cautious, not dramatic. Great tips for writing a fantastic discussion section. And as is the case with all of these components of our webinar today, we've got a lot more information both on our website, scitrain.com, and on the Bentham Science YouTube channel. So if you'd like more of these kinds of trainings, or indeed you'd like us to show up remotely at your university or institution and do one specially for you, do get in touch with us at the end. Let's move on though and introduce the introduction, which, although is the first core component of the IMRaD structure of an academic article, it's often one of the sections that we write at the end of the process. And it's going to be written in both the present tense and in what we call the present perfect tense in English. It is known that this type of cancer, that's present tense, previous studies have not yet addressed, is the present perfect. These kinds of tense structures, most complicated in the introduction, as you'll see in a moment, but you are going to introduce a question. With your introduction, you're then going to give the reader information about what we call the state of the art. What is currently known, what's currently out there, what's currently being done, what's the current thinking, the state of the art relating to that particular question. And then at the end of the introduction, you're going to need a short section that tells the reader what you did. And those, my friends, are the three key sections of a fantastic, well-structured introduction to a research article. Written in the present perfect, you are going to give your readers that bigger picture, because research, of course, is not conducted in a vacuum. You've got to make sure that people are interested in reading your study. So following logically from your literature review, which, by the way, you do not include in your research article, you've got information about what's currently known in your field, that topic that goes into a concise section in the introduction, following logically, building on what you know about the current literature, explained in a concise, easy to understand, short way, clearly stated. And of course, that question that your research paper is going to address has got to be testable. Here's what we mean by all of this information. You will have an opening sentence that takes the reader straight to the issue. A section in your introduction that contains a brief summary of the controversies and the best evidence. Keep with the rules of good writing. Write this in the active rather than in the passive. Most important details related to the issue, and end your introduction with a crisp and clear research question and how you set out to answer it. Don't believe us? Have a look at any paper written in a high impact factor journal, Nature Science, for example. The end of the introduction is always a phrase, a question. Here we show. In this paper, we will demonstrate X, Y, and Z. It's a bridge between the end of the introduction and the method section. And so here's a summary of what we were just discussing. What to include in your introduction, those three short sections. Grab the reader. Get them immediately interested in the crucial issue that your paper addresses. 2 or 3 paragraphs in your introduction, if possible, and no extensive off-the-topic literature reviews are needed. Set the scene, give the state of the art, rather than describing everything that's ever been done on that particular topic. You've got a 3-paragraph plan for a well-written introduction for your next paper. A research question. What's the question that your study is going to address? At the beginning of the introduction, first paragraph. What's the question that your study seeks to address? Second section, what's the current state of the art? What's currently known? What's currently debated? What's the current thought process? What's the current thinking in your field around this question? And then finally, that very short few sentences at the end of the introduction, this study shows, or here we will demonstrate. As you drill down into a research question, you're going to let your readers know what is being addressed. This sets up the expectation for the rest of the study or the grant or the conference presentation, by the way. The structure of all of this is very, very similar. Get your readers interested, tell them what the question's going to be, and then answer that question with the rest of the paper using explicit phrases, using question words, stating the hypothesized effects, and identifying your types of variables and study design. Varies depending upon your subject area. Of course, Scott and I have lots of information specific to individual research areas, so do get in touch if we can help you in particular with your own research topic. But this is how the introduction needs to be structured. But having said all that, it's important nevertheless to leave enough time to go through the whole process, right, Scott? Which of these sections of your research paper is going to take longest?
Okay, let's see what our guests think. What is the most difficult section to revise and edit? Abstract, introduction, methods, results, or discussion conclusion. Now, specifically, we're asking about editing and revising here. We realize that some sections can be more problematic to edit and revise based on comments from your advisor or co-authors or reviewers. Gareth, how about you? You've written so many papers. Is there a particular section that is difficult for you to revise based on feedback?
They're all tricky. They're all tricky. But I mean, if you follow some of the tips that we've presented in this event today, hopefully at least with the introduction, methods, results, and discussion, if you have a clear template and a clear structure in mind when putting these together, then it will be easier for you later on in the process, especially during peer review.
Okay, thank you. Let's see what our guests said. Ah, very interesting. Let's share the results here because this is really quite interesting. Overwhelmingly, our guests seem to feel that the discussion and conclusion is the most difficult section to revise and edit. 48% of you said discussion and conclusion. Next most difficult section to revise is the introduction at 25%, followed by methods at 14%, abstract at 7%, and results at 5%. I guess that kind of makes sense. I'm not surprised to see your results because that's very straightforward reporting on what you found, but I can understand why the other sections can be troublesome
Hmm.
to revise.
Hmm.
Does this surprise you at all, Gareth, the results of our poll?
Um, I guess not. I mean, most people would be, I mean, the discussion section, the conclusion sections have the least like visible templates to them. So maybe that's one reason why people spend longer, find it harder to revise that section. But yeah, I would encourage everybody to have a look at the Bentham Science YouTube channel where we have more information about all of these different components of research writing. And again, get in touch with us. You can reach out to us on LinkedIn. Get in touch through the sidetrain.com website if you'd like any more specific information about writing any of these sections, or indeed if you need support with statistics or support with editing or writing in general. We are always here to help. That's what we do, Scott and I. Let's finish up this section of the webinar by just giving you a few general tips about English writing. Very important. I know many of our audience members, although highly proficient in the use of AI tools. By the way, we have another series of events on that as well. Scott has much more information on the use of AI tools helping with effective English writing. You are nevertheless going to have to understand what you've written and be able to revise it yourself. So we have some tips for English writing. Do try to think in English and write as you think. Do it a little bit every day. Train yourself as a more proficient foreign language writer. If you translate, use a subject area specialist. Don't just dump your text into ChatGPT or Gemini or DeepSeek and ask it for a translation. You will lose a lot of the subject area context. That's just a fact. And our top tip for being an effective writing and publishing researcher is to work with papers you like and respect in your field for style, shape, structure, and presentation. Our best tip to all researchers starting in a publication journey is to find the papers of successful people working in your research field who are publishing their work in high impact factor journals, journals that you would aspire to publish your research in as well, and see how they put the papers together, see how they structure them, see how they format them, put the figure captions, the figures together, and copy the style of successful writing and publishing academics in your field. Generally, in English, we use short sentences in the written form, keeping the subject and verb close together. That makes it much easier for everybody to understand what's going on. Use active voice wherever possible. I know this is a major area of confusion in the way that academic writing is taught around the world, but active, active, active. If you don't believe us, have a look again at high impact factor research articles published in leading journals. You will see that 70 to 80% of the language is written in the active voice. We did this. We did this. Our team did this, and so on. Cut out those unnecessary filler words and don't use jargon in your academic writing. Again, we have events on this. We have recordings of events on this. Jump on over to the Bentham Science YouTube channel to learn more. In terms of logical flow, you're going to use precise language. You're going to use clear sentences in order to structure your paragraphs, making clear transitions between your ideas to build a coherent argument. And don't be afraid of repetition in your academic writing. Very, very good skill. Repeat yourself. Do it in your presentations. Do it in your talks, in your online work, and in your written work as well. Emphasize those key takeaway ideas. So there's no doubt when somebody reads one of your papers, they know what the key take-home message from that piece of research is. Message, audience, and structure. If you remember those three elements of research article writing, you will be in good shape in the future. Right, Scott? How are we doing? Everything going well?
Going great. I just wanted to chime in and support you on that last point about logical flow. And also earlier you showed the egg timer and there was a note on there to link the sections together. This is vitally important for readability. I would spend, if I'm a researcher, I would spend extra time going through and making sure that those sections, the IMRaD sections, link logically together and flow. That will make your paper so much more readable. I find when I'm editing manuscripts, even if the rest of the manuscript is well written and the pieces individually work, linking them together into a cohesive story is, I think, one area where a lot of manuscripts fall short. So I would recommend everyone spend extra time following Gareth's advice here and making sure that the sections flow logically together and relate to each other. So great advice from Gareth there.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Proofreading your work as well, very important. Do go back and look at what you've written. Take a break after writing to gain perspective. Read aloud to catch those awkward phrases. Use the plethora of spelling and grammar checking AI tools now available to help you with your work. We've got events on this. We've got recommendations on this. Again, get in touch if that's of use. We're going to be doing a range of webinars this year on AI writing and the use of AI tools. Make sure you check your citations and references for accuracy. Another issue with the use of LLMs and writing AI tools like DeepSeek, ChatGPT, and so on is that they do tend to hallucinate references. You need to make sure that you've read and checked all of the references that you cite in your research papers. Seek feedback from peers and mentors, revise based on feedback, and rinse and repeat. There's no reason why you can't keep doing this a few times to get the paper in the best possible shape before you make that submission. We've talked about this in our event today, which verb tenses to use in the different sections. We just put this together at the end just to summarize what's happening in the introduction, the methods, results, and discussion, the purpose of these different sections, the verb tenses that you would want to use in those different sections, and how those sentences might look. Again, if you need help with English writing, we have lots of other events. But for now, let me just quickly summarize the IMRaD academic structure, methods, results, discussion, and introduction in this right order, in the sequence that you would write these different sections as you go through your Manuscript. And with that, I think it's time to bring back our dear friend Scott and see if there are any questions as we close out our event today. Scott, how are we doing?
Well, thanks so much, Gareth, as always, for sharing your insights. I always learn a tremendous amount doing these events together with you. And we have some wonderful questions, some very insightful questions from our guests today for you, Gareth. So let me just go through some of them here. We've answered some of them in the Q&A panel, so thanks to everyone for the questions that you shared. I'll try to go through some of the other remaining questions here. So I think one common question that we get from guests who I think look at your publication count, Gareth, is what are some tips for publishing in impact factor journals? You've published in a number of impact factor journals yourself. Based on the information that you shared today, are there any standout tips? We could do a whole event just on publishing in impact factor journals, and maybe we will. But any standout tips today for our guests who are looking to aim high and publish in high IF journals?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the best tip for doing that is have a look at what those impact factor journals are currently publishing. And I would say find papers or a series of articles that do something similar to what you would like to do with your research, the kind of question, the kind of experiment, the kind of analysis, the kind of outcomes. Find a couple of examples of similar studies to the kind of study that you would like to write up in those high impact factor journals and copy the style. I'm not saying you should copy the text, that would be bad, that would be plagiarism, but if you have examples of research that has been published in the journals that you aspire to publish your work in, I would use those as a template for your own research writing. And that's really the best advice that we have for doing that. You need to focus your question, make it broad, make it interesting, so that many people, a broad array of readers, will be interested in reading your study. And that's the other secret to getting published in high impact factor journals. They have broad readership.
That's great advice. Thank you, Gareth. And thanks for your question to our guests. It's an excellent question. It's one that we hear quite often is how to publish in IF journals. A related question from another guest is, do you have any advice? Well, I mentioned in the chat that reading is the secret writing skill. It's something I've always shared with my students, my university students. The question is, do you have any advice on how many research papers that we need to read to become excellent writers? Well, that's a great question. I guess the short answer is as many as possible, the more we read. But I think Gareth's advice is excellent. Try to read papers all the way through, of course, rather than just skimming abstracts, and really follow the logical flow of papers. Of course, the more that you read, the more you'll pick up. Read critically. Also, pay attention to how authors are linking ideas together to get that readability of logical flow. So I think the more the better, but specifically read critically and look at how those papers are pieced together. As Gareth said, find a very impactful article and see the conventions that the authors have followed to put that kind of highly readable and highly impactful paper together.
Yeah, we're
A-
in that.
Any, sorry, Gareth, any advice on this, on how
Yeah, I
much
know.
reading we need to do to get better at writing?
I agree with you, Scott. Like, this is a difficult time, or a fascinating and interesting time, because so many ways for us to read and synthesize literature, extract research questions using AI tools, but that doesn't help us to get better at writing or necessarily to get better at understanding our own research area either. So let's recommend the use of AI tools to speed up different tasks, but also keep up to date with the literature. You have to actually know about your subject area and learn from the writing styles of others. I think that's really important. But it's a really interesting question. That's a great question.
That's a great question. And thanks for all the questions we received. We'll try to get to some more here. Just some housekeeping. Many of you asked, will we be sharing a certificate? Yes, we will. We'll be sending out a certificate tomorrow, just about 24 hours after the event. Check your inbox. We'll send you a downloadable certificate for joining us today. Thank you so much for joining. And also, we will share with you the full video recording with transcript, with chat. You can review that video recording anytime, as often as you want. It's absolutely free. We'll share the link to that video with you tomorrow. So yes, certificates and videos will go out tomorrow, and that's for every Bentham Science event. We'll be sharing that with you 24 hours after the event has finished. So thank you for asking about that. Great question. Another guest asked, do you provide in-person or virtual support for writing papers? Thanks for your question. Specifically, not tied with this event series, but reach out to us. We'll share with you our contact information. You can reach out to us by email or on LinkedIn. And if we can help you with that, we will. If not, we'll find resources that can. So great question. Support for writing papers. We'll reach out to you by email after the event. Thanks for your question. Um, Another question from a guest here. Can you organize a webinar on how to use the methods for writing research papers? That's a great question. So I think the question is specifically focusing on the methods. That would be a very interesting event to put together. What do you think, Gareth? Can we organize an event on methods writing?
Yeah, we can, of course. Absolutely. That would be great. We have some information in short form, which we'll share with you about writing the methods specifically, also the kind of English language that would go into the method section. But yeah, absolutely. I saw another comment in the chat about review paper writing. Yes, we do have events on that as well and recordings of events on that as well. So do get in touch with us. We'll be happy to share more information about that as well. But great feedback and fantastic questions. Thank
And thanks to everyone for the kind comments. I think people are enjoying your talk today, Gareth. So thanks to everyone for all of your kind feedback. We really appreciate it. And if there's anything that you didn't like about the event today, let us know. That'll help us to improve as well. So thanks to everyone for your feedback. And let's see if we can handle maybe one more question before we go. One of our guests asks, what are the criteria in reviewers' minds that will allow an article to be accepted or rejected, specifically Bentham science reviewers? Well, that's an excellent question. More generally, Gareth, I think you touched on some of the things that reviewers are looking for when reviewing articles. I don't know if there are specific points that Bentham reviewers are looking for when they review articles like this, but generally, um, any suggestions, Gareth, on what reviewers are looking for when they review an IMRaD style manuscript?
Well, I mean, the first thing to say is that reviewers, the job of a reviewer is to help you, improve your paper. I mean, get the paper up to standard for publication in that journal. And a byproduct of that is that you should, we hope, get valuable positive feedback on your research article that will help you improve it. That's, of course, not always the case, as everybody who's ever received peer review comments will attest. But if you do feel that you aren't being treated fairly in peer review, get in touch with the editor. Don't just take it. Get in touch with the editor. What Bentham Science recommends that you do, or indeed mandates that you do in most of its journals, is to write what we call a pre-submission inquiry to the editor before you even go in with the full paper. And we would recommend, Scott and I, that you do this anyway, often even before you begin the writing process of a research article. So you can get a journal editor interested in what you're doing before you write and make the submission. And that should make the whole process much, much easier. It does make the whole process much, much easier. So we have other events on this. Do get in touch with us. Do follow Bentham Science. Here are their social media handles. You can see them here. That Twitter one, of course, a little bit out of date, but nevertheless, we will be back with other events in the future, right, Scott?
Absolutely. And we'll be sending out reminders of upcoming events. I've also put our contact information in the chat here, Gareth's and mine. So if you have any questions, you can reach out to us and check your inbox tomorrow for your certificate and a link to the full recording of Gareth's talk today with a full chat and transcript. And thank you all so much for making time to join this event today. We hope it was useful for you. I wish we could cover everything in just an hour. But if you have any other deeper questions, reach out to us. Any questions about the Bentham team, you can also reach out to us. And if we cannot answer your question, we'll find someone who can. And thanks so much, everyone, for joining. And thank you, most of all, Gareth, thanks to you for making time to lend your insights with us today.
Fantastic. Always great to do these events with you together, Scott. I love it. There's the QR code in the top right-hand corner of the screen in case you want to scan that quickly. That will give you 3 months absolutely free access to all of the Bentham Journal content. Have a great day, evening, afternoon, and see you in the next one.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for joining, and we'll see you next month. And